The goal today is to create a border around a photo, warp it a little bit to add some dimension to it, and add a drop shadow to it. So let's crank it up here. I'm going to start off by cropping my image. That's always a good starting point. That way we can be sure that we're working with the exact size and shape later that we want it. I'm going to choose unconstrained from the crop menu. I'm going to drag it in a little bit here. I want to get rid of this person over here in the corner. Drag that in, and you crop your image how you want to. This is only, of course, my example. Keeping the ratio pretty similar, making it a little bit wider, a little bit more interesting. Now, as I work on that, now I want to check the resolution. We want to make sure, in this case, for this project, I'm going to go to Image and Image Size, which is Option-Command-I. For this project, I want to be working at 300 pixels per inch. Notice there's 3,800 pixels horizontally in this image. When I switch to 300, you don't see that number change. That's because resample image isn't checked. Okay? We don't want to change the number of pixels in the image, only how densely they're packed. Click OK, and our image hasn't changed yet. We haven't seen it change. All right? We need to enlarge the canvas size, but before I do that, I like to make a duplicate of my background layer. We'll see why in a second. So I'm going to go to Image and Canvas Size, or Option-Command-C. Switch this to inches, so we're looking at a little bit more logical measurement, something we're more comfortable with, more used to. And I want to add a couple inches to the width and the height of each of these dimensions. I'm going to go 14.7 by 9.6. All right, and now making sure that the point is in the center will equally distribute the space around the image. If I went to the top left, it would put all the extra space down and to the right. And we'll click OK. And we'll see this grow. Now, if I were to look at the background layer at this point, you'll see that it's put a black border around it. That's why I like to have a duplicate, because it'll keep the transparency. Before I go any further, I'm going to add one more layer, and I'm going to make it just going to be a colored layer so that I can see what I'm working against. So I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to use a shortcut, Shift-Command-N. Give it any name you'd like. I'm going to call mine white. And I'm going to go to Edit and Fill. Choose white from the drop-down menu. Click OK. Now I have a full white layer. I'm going to rearrange that, put it behind current layer. Okay? Already looks interesting, doesn't it? So I want to make yet again another new layer, and this one's going to be a white box the same size as the photo. Now to create that white box, instead of using a vector box, and I could, I'm going to just use pixels. Alright, so I'm going to command-click on my layer image over here. That's going to turn it into a selection. Then I'll go Edit, Fill, and again I'm going to choose white. Alright, so not so easy to see. Deselect, not so easy to see because it's just barely over top. This we can barely see an edge. I'm going to rearrange them. So now the white is behind the photo. Okay. Now I want to resize that box a little bit and have that white box turn into a photo frame. I'm going to go Transform, and I'm going to do Free Transform. It's also Command-T. All right, it's under the Edit menu as well. I'm going to drag these edges up a little bit and out. I want them to be fairly equal. They don't need to be perfect. If this image was truly created in a darkroom, they wouldn't be perfect. Okay, that's the manual process had little perfection in it. It was more art. All right, this isn't exact, but it's going to be good enough for the video, I think. I'm going to press Return to apply my transformation, and there we go. All right, I have a white border. Notice I turned this layer off for a couple seconds so I can work on it. Now, just in case I want these pieces again later, I'm going to modify this by shift-clicking. Notice I've selected both layers by holding down the Shift key. Just these two, the white box and the photo, and I'm going to make a duplicate of them. I can also do this by hitting Command-J. I'm going to turn off all these background layers that I don't need. And now just these two layers I want to merge together into one piece. I'm going to go into the Layer Flyout menu, and I'm going to go to Merge Visible. Those are the only two layers that are turned on. They're the only visible ones. When I do that, you can see that now we have a single layer made out of the two pieces, while we still have the original pieces down here. It's time to add our drop shadow, but really we're going to only add it temporarily. Okay, we're going to modify it a ton later. I'm going to double-click next to the layer to launch the Layer Styles palette. I click on the words Drop Shadow. So when I add that drop shadow, and notice I clicked on the words, not just the checkbox, I can click down here and drag it around however I want to. The actual position of the drop shadow isn't important to me at this point, but I will increase the size to soften up the edges some, and then I click OK. Now, I'll turn this layer back on so we can see it again there. It has a nice drop shadow, there's nothing wrong with that, but we can improve it dramatically. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to use my control key. You notice that the pointer changes, it shows a contextual menu is going to pop out, and I'm going to click on there. Brings out a group of options that are really handy. One of my favorites is Create Layer. If I click on Create Layer, it'll give me a warning. It says, so we can't render some effects as a layer. But what it's going to do is, instead of it being a layer effect or a layer style, now the drop shadow is its own layer. Okay? So it's a quick way to do it. There's other ways to do it, but this is a very quick way. So we have a separate layer for the drop shadow, a separate layer for the photo itself. Let's bend it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that my photo layer is chosen or selected, active. Go to Edit, Transform, and Warp. And this allows me to bend the image however I want to. If I grab it here, we're going to see the image bend dramatically. I don't want to do anything quite that crazy, so I'm going to undo it. But down here, if I grab it, pull it, we can see it's going to give us the look as though the corners are bent in or up a little bit. Okay, I'll probably do a little bit more than I normally would on this. Over dramatize it just a little so that you can get a feel. And it's okay to do just one edge. I usually think though that if you do one edge, you should do others as well. Alright, so I have the warp applied, or the warp is there. I'm going to apply it by hitting the checkbox, or I can apply it by hitting the return or enter key. Oh, the beach ball's spinning. It must be a large file. There we go. So it's applied, and this already looks quite a bit better than it did. The shadow, which is right here, is laid into the corners pretty well. And we can fix that up even just a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is go to Edit, Transform, Warp, but this time I have the shadow layer selected. So I'm going to pull this up a little bit. I'm going to pull this up a little bit, and I'm going to pull these in quite a bit. Okay, and I'll do the same all the way around, even though we aren't seeing it over here so much. Okay, I'm going to pull it in and in, just so we keep the same sort of shape. Apply it. There we go. Now we can see that it's barely showing up, right? As long as I have the Move tool selected, which I do, I can use my arrow keys to nudge this a little bit, and you can see it moving underneath there. Now, if I wanted to add just a slightly different effect, to add the thickness of a paper edge, I could also make a copy of that top image, do a Command J, and now what I'm going to do is fill it with a kind of a tan color to give the paper the feeling of thickness. I'm going to Command click on that to turn it into a selection. I'm going to go Edit, Fill. Instead of white, this time I'm going to choose color. Now the color you choose is up to you. I think something around a 40% or 50% gray works well, but I like it to be a warm gray. I like it to be in the yellow realm, because if you've ever worked in the world of photo processing, you know that prints tend to yellow over time. And then I click OK. Now, we have this large grayish yellow rectangle here that's not doing us any good. If I move it down in the layer stack though, we'll see it's going to start doing us some good. Remember, it's lined up exactly with the layer above it. So I'm going to use my arrow keys and the Move tool to nudge it. What I'm going to do is get a little closer here so I can see what's happening with this menu. We should see it appear over here on the side. There it is. I'm going to nudge it down one or two as well. There we go. And you can see it lineated it harshly, but it lineated it there and shows like the thickness of paper. Okay. Now it's up to you. You can take these two layers and you can also merge them. Merge our two selected ones. All right. So now it becomes one piece. I went to merge and merge layers there. And if we want to add just a little bit more effect, we can go filter and liquefy. Using liquefy will give us a slightly more organic feel. Now the reason I merge those layers is because I want to liquefy and push everything together. All I'm using is my forward warp tool. That's usually the default tool that's selected when you launch Photoshop. And I just kind of, that was kind of a lot. Just kind of pushing some pixels around in a few different places can give this a slightly worn feel. Alright, don't forget this white edge over here. So if you move and modify and opt to move to a different sort of background, that's going to show up. When I do this as well, it's also moving the black and white edge. Alright, that should be enough to just show what's happening. Let's see how it works. Try to do liquefy all in one step, not going back to it over and over again. It makes permanent modifications to pixels, so it can be tough to use. Alright, there we go. And there you have it. We have a modified photo that has an interesting shadow, a little bit of wrinkle in the paper, much more realistic feel.